What's cracking YouTube, Neckpunch here, and some of you have been asking me about the design process for the fakemon that I create. So I thought today I'd give you an inside look and take you through the process of designing and drawing a fakemon in Adobe Photoshop. Recently, I was challenged to design a fire and fairy type starter Pokemon that was a rabbit. This was a real test for me because, as many of you know, this fire starter rabbit idea has already been done a bunch of times and done relatively well. And even the fire fairy thing is nothing new. So, the challenge in front of me was how the heck to design a Pokemon that wasn't just a rip-off of all the other fire fairy bunnies out there on the internet. I certainly had my work cut out for me, and I think the process I went through will give you a really good look at how I do what I do. So let's get into it. The first job is coming up with the concept. I wanted it to be a floppy bunny because the bunnies we have are both standing upright and relatively kind of jumpy. So this one needed to contrast. The idea put me in mind of a book I read as a kid called The Velveteen Rabbit. Shout out if you know that one. It's a beautiful story. Anyway, since it was a fire starter, my wife suggested thinking about fire starters, and I could definitely see a potential link between a cotton wool ball soaked in kerosene and the fluffy tail on a rabbit, but I didn't know where the fairy type would fit in. The more I pictured it in my mind, the cotton wool began to look more and more like a toasted marshmallow, which I actually thought could fit in really well. After all, there's already an established link between candy and fairy types. This idea put me in mind of a game we used to play as kids called Chubby Bunnies, where you'd have to stuff as many marshmallows into your mouth as you can and coherently say Chubby Bunnies. Don't try it at home, kids. I'm pretty sure the game's illegal now because someone died. Anyway, I made the decision to do a floppy bunny with big chubby cheeks inspired by toasted marshmallows. Next, the design process. So the first thing I usually do is just scribble down with the paint tool a really basic design, kind of the closest that I can freehand to what I'm thinking of. And this is what I ended up with. Then from there, I start to refine it. So I get the pen tool and make some circles to try to get good solid shapes for the body. So I did the head, I made a circle for the cheek, and I wanted the cheeks to match. So select Alt, Command V, and then move that over to end up with doubles. Then just select and Command T to transform and adjust the shape to the position that you want. Where I wanted the cheeks to attach, I deleted a little bit of the line and then started on drawing the ears. I pretty much used the pen tool for everything because I'm using a mouse, so I'm just not that good with drawing it freehand on the screen. The pen tool allows you to make lines, adjust them to be exactly where you want them to be, and then when everything is in position, you stroke that line with a brush, and that puts down the line for you. And of course, you can do that in any color that you want, but because I do Pokemon, I'm almost always doing drawing in black lines. So, drew the ears. Took away the template layer to check that the ears looked like they were where they should be, and I was pretty happy with that, so we make a new layer. I also find it's helpful to name your layers because I used to not name my layers and I would always lose track. Go over to the paths and click the little button down the bottom, which is to stroke the path with a brush, and there you have it. Then did the exact same thing to make the body. I like to create everything on different layers and then merge it right at the end because I'm always changing my mind and changing what I want to do. And if you don't draw something because it's going to be covered up by something else, then that's fine. But then if you move that something else, you often end up having to kind of redraw stuff that you left out. So I'm drawing the entire body here, or almost the entire body here, even the parts that are going to be covered up by limbs and ears, same way that I drew the whole head. I also like to name my parts because I keep the parts in case I need to redraw a line that gets deleted. Stroke that with a brush, and there you have it. Next thing is draw the paws, and we're gonna use the pen tool to make a path for the paws, and then get them drawn on as well. When using the pen tool, you make a point, the next point will automatically create a path between those 2 points, and then when you command click at any point on that path, it'll then create another point that'll allow you to pull it and adjust it, manipulate that line, and you can can also tweak the angle by which that works with the little bits that come off. I don't know what they're called, they probably have a name. And that allows you to work out the nature of the curve between the points and yeah, get everything exactly where you want it to be. After doing the back leg, that was pretty much the outline done. So then the time came to color it. I like to make separate layers for the color or the fill to the outline, so that way I can make sure that there's no gaps between the fill and the outline. So I select the shape for the head by using the magic wand to select the empty space, make a separate layer for the head fill, modify, expand, and 1 or 2 pixels, depending on the thickness of the line. My line thickness is usually 4 pixels thick, so expanding 1 or 2 pixels kind of works. It means that you're not going outside the lines, but you're definitely going far enough. And so here I've selected the yellow that I want for this bunny's body and head, and I'm just making a head fill layer, a body fill layer, and getting all the layers in the right order. Obviously the head needs to be in front of the body so that we can see it. And so yeah, shuffling layers a little bit there, cheeks in front of the head, getting everything kind of where it's supposed to be. For the cheeks, went over to paths where I still had those circles, and you can command click on that to get that circle selected, and then fill that instead. Because, as you saw earlier, I adjusted the shape of the cheeks, the white circle that I got this time was not perfect, so I moved it into place, and then it's just a question of erasing, using the eraser tool to get rid of the little extra bits that are hanging past the line that I want, and then use the brush tool to fill in the little bits of gaps. And this is why I like working with a fill layer behind an outline layer, because it means that I don't need to have the steady hand to go right up to the line. If I go a little bit beyond the line, that's okay, because I'm actually working behind the line. And then I just use the eraser tool to do a few little adjustments of that line and make it so that, you know, it doesn't end with that squareness, but sort of tapers off. Now, the back leg, I actually originally colored in white, but then I decided, no, it doesn't work, doesn't look as good, so I just colored it in yellow as well. And then we did the same thing with the front paws. Select the empty space there, expand, make a layer, fill on that layer, make sure that layer is behind the outline layer, and Bob's your uncle. Then it came time to make the face. So use the pen tool, made the face that I wanted, stroked the line with a brush, accidentally had my brush on 20 pixels, rather than 3 or 4, and then we had the face. I played around with the eyes a little bit, try to figure out, and originally it was going to be a sleepy bunny like this, but then I just decided there wasn't enough expression in the face. Had to go at making him look like this, which makes him look a little bit happier but also a little bit racist. Decided to give open eyes a crack, and actually cheated a little bit. I went and grabbed Sproutling's eye, my grass starter, and plonked that on into the image, and then just started tweaking the shape of that to make it look a little bit more like it was on a round head rather than just sitting flush on a flat surface. Couldn't be bothered drawing the other eye either, so I copied it, but you know, you can copy, edit, and then transform and flip horizontal to get an exact mirror image, but that looked really weird, and I think it was just the way that the shading was on that eye. So what I ended up doing, rather than having to draw the whole thing, was just select the eyeball, and the most precise way, not necessarily the quickest, but the most precise way is to use the pen tool to do that. Created a path to select that area, cut it, pasted it, so now it's on a different layer, then flip that horizontal so that it matches with the other eye, put it behind, and then essentially just use one of my favorite little tools, which is Puppet Warp, to just get it exactly where you want it to go. And with Puppet Warp, essentially what you do is you just place pins. It's like pinning something to a board, and it'll place a pin where you click and then drag the thing so that it's everything's exactly where you want it to be. It does distort the image a little bit, so it's not always the best tool to use, but for small adjustments, it's really, really useful. And there we had our little bunny's eyes. Just played around a little bit with the positioning of them, and then the next thing to do was the color of the eyes. Didn't want to keep them brown, So selected the eyes, you go to layer, create new adjustment layer, hue, saturation, and then that allows you to change the hue and saturation of your layer. So the nice thing is that the black won't really be touched, the white won't really be touched, but what you will get to do is change the eyeballs, which is what I did, and made them nice and red. Played around with them a little bit, but in the end decided open eyes was the way to go. Drew the tail in the same way that I did all the other things, colored that one in white, just selected all that space, and then filled that with the white paint, which wasn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. There was probably an easier way to do it, but this is kind of what we had. Then came the time to start putting in the shading. When creating shadows, I'll use the pen tool to select the area that I want to darken that needs to be in shadow. And if you don't know where shadows are supposed to go, the easiest thing is just look at other images, look at the way other things are drawn, and take your cues from there. The main thing is just decide where the light's coming from, and I almost always choose top left, which means that bottom right is where the shading is going to go. I'll use the pen tool to create a shape, fill that shape with an adjustment layer, decrease the saturation, decrease the lightness, and there you have a pretty decent shadow. Use the brush to paint on more of that adjustment layer if it's not exactly where you want it to go. And then what I also like to do is use the smudge tool. Just smudge the edges, just blur the edges a little bit of that layer to make it look a little bit smoother. And then we did the exact same thing on the body. I'm only really precise with the edge that you're going to see. You'll see that the adjustment layer fills that whole weird shape that I've made, but when you choose create clipping mask, it means that even if that layer is over the top of all the other layers of your image, it will only actually affect the layer that it's directly in front of. So you don't have to be quite as precise. So I'll smudge that down, get that looking nice, and he's coming along. The next thing, which was the hardest part of this image, was creating the toasted marshmallow pattern. I didn't know how to do that. I really wanted to try to do that in a way that wasn't too overly detailed, but also didn't just look like dots, like freckles or whatever. Essentially, I went with making it 3 colors: white, orange, and brown. I used the lasso tool to essentially just freehand draw these splodgy shapes, and then once they were all in place, edit, fill, and filled them with the nice brown color on their own layer, of course, that I was going for. This image is like a draft that I did that I wasn't quite happy with because I didn't even use any fill tools for this. I just used the paintbrush and painted it straight on, but that gave me a little template to work with, and then I used the lasso tool to make a cleaner version of it. Once I had my nice burnt bits, I just wanted to outline them in orange. There's too much orange on the draft, and to make sure that we got a nice orange outline on each thing, I selected that brown layer. Then you go to select, expand, and I expanded it by 2 pixels, and then on a separate layer underneath the brown, filled that selection with the orange color, and that gave us this. And then I just used the paintbrush tool to fill in a few little bits here and there to make it look a little bit, I don't know, just a little bit nicer, a little bit less messy, and a little bit more like a marshmallow. Once I was happy that the orange was all where it should be, just use the smudge tool to smudge the edges of that and make it look like it flows together a little bit better. So from there, I was pretty happy with how the tail was looking. Decided to do the shading as well. Played with the pen tool to make sure that it was a little bit of a sharper thing, because the tail is a different shape. It's not quite as round, it's a little bit more square. And so we got this kind of a shape here, but then otherwise the concept is exactly the same. Select the area that we want to shade, create a new adjustment layer. Now this one, because we actually want the shadow to go over the brown, the orange, and the white, and they're all separate layers, I couldn't do the adjustment layer as a clipping mask, so instead I just edited the shape of it. I knew that I didn't want it to be hanging over the white area. So we command click to select the entire white shape, command shift I to then change your selection to everything except the white shape, and then delete everything that is not included in that space. Just check from far away that you're happy with how it looks, and then just gave it a good smudge down to make it flow. So I did the ears next, and it was the exact same concept as with the tail. Used the lasso tool to create a nice selection that I wanted to give the burnt effect. Rather than having the brown on the top, I made the ear tips brown because I saw this picture of a rabbit that's got black tipped ears, and I thought that could be a cool nod to, you know, a real world creature. So I made the burnt tips on the ears, select that brown shape, expand the selection by a couple pixels, and fill that with orange and make sure the orange layer is underneath. Did a little bit of tidy up on this one and then smudge it down. Then the same strategy to create an adjustment layer for the shading on the ear. Again, I'm sure there's probably an easier way to do this. I just don't know what it is, and this is kind of what I figured out works for me. Essentially rinse and repeat for the other ear, and then it came time to move on to the cheeks. Now the cheeks were hard work. I had quite a few goes at the cheeks, but eventually got a pattern that I was pretty happy with, that wasn't too detailed but still had that kind of burnt marshmallow sort of feel with kind of the gooey lava vibe, and eventually we ended up with something that looked like this. I realized I hadn't actually put the light shading. What I've got is darkness on the underside, but it's also good to have, you know, whatever's on the very top, on the most exposed part, to be lit up as well. So we do the same thing. We'll make a selection, create an adjustment layer, but instead of making it darker, we increase the brightness. I wouldn't usually increase the saturation, but you just play with it until it looks like it should. Now, from here, I thought I was finished. And then I decided it didn't look enough like a bunny. In fact, it looked a little bit weird. So I started looking at other pictures of bunnies, and I decided that we needed more white on the face. The cheeks just didn't look enough like they were cheeks. They looked like these weird balls that were just stuck onto this thing's head. So I wanted more of the face to be white so that the cheeks were actually part of it. So I decided to start redesigning the face at this point, which is annoying, and I wish that I would have, you know, figured that out at the beginning, but sometimes that's just not how it works. So got out my pen tool, started designing a new line based on the cheeks that I had made, because I wanted to at least be able to keep the brown and the orange bits, and that's why I tend not to merge layers until I'm absolutely sure that I'm happy with the shape. Once I got those cheeks where I wanted them, I did merge those layers and got them shaded right. Also moved the mouth and the nose up. I then got the left cheek and the right cheek on separate layers and just adjusted them until I was happy with where they were sitting. From there, just used the pen tool to draw the rest of the face, and then used the warp tool to tweak the eyes and get them on a little bit more of an angle. After I'd finished, I was sort of torn between the different images that I'd made, so I lined them up side by side. We have the original, then we had it redone with a white face, and then a completely redrawn face. And I ended up deciding, yep, the third one, when I look at them all together, the third one there is the best.
And there we have Chubunny, the toasted Pokemon.
I've already got a fire type starter for Kotean, so I decided let's ditch the starter idea, and this could just be a wild encounter in Kotean. I therefore made it a fairy and fire type, and rather than blaze, its abilities now are of course cheek pouch and gluttony.
Chubunny are often found near the campsites of humans, attempting to use their cuteness to receive sugary treats. They spend most of their time in a hypoglycemic haze. And that's about it for now. I'd love to know a couple of things. First of all, let me know in the comments if you would like to see more content like this. I'm happy for this to just be a one-off insight into what I do,
but if you found it helpful or interesting and you'd like to see more, then let me know. Secondly, I think Chubunny needs an evolution.
So let me encourage you to get creative and let me know your ideas for what that evolution should look like and what it could be named. If you'd like me to make a Pokemon for you, then check out my store, link is in the description. But thanks for checking out this video. If you liked it, don't forget to leave one. And until next time, my name is Neckpunch. Have a good one.